Every experience you live, every feeling you hold, every thought you entertain is a seed placed in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind. And this mind, your silent, unseen partner, never argues, never questions, never rejects. It simply expands whatever you offer it. Whatever you give attention to, it magnifies. It takes the whisper of an emotion and turns it into a story into a pattern, and a pattern into a reality that stands before you. Your subconscious is not moved by the loudness of your words, but by the vividness of your inner acceptance. You may speak of what you want, yet secretly dwell on what you fear, and it is the dwelling that becomes your destiny. The world you walk in is not built by outer action first, but by the steady focus of your inner gaze. That inner gaze is the architect, the builder, the silent force that shapes events, opportunities, encounters, and outcomes. Each moment you hold an idea, you breathe life into it. You clothe it with feeling, you feed it with repetition, and eventually it grows so real within that the outer world must echo it back. This is why attention is your greatest currency. Whatever you spend it on increases in value. Focus on problems and they multiply. Focus on possibility and it expands. Focus on abundance and doors appear where walls once stood. Focus on lack and even what you have seems to shrink before your eyes. There is nothing in your life right now that did not first exist as an imaginal impression. Whether you consciously created it or unconsciously allowed it, your inner state was the doorway through which it arrived. To change anything, you must first change what you consistently give attention to. Attention is not merely looking at something. It is accepting it, feeling it, identifying with it, allowing it to sink into the depth of you where all creation begins. When you understand this, you no longer chase outcomes. You no longer try to force life to bend to your will. Instead, you choose what you entertain. You choose the mood you practice. You choose which inner stories you energize and which ones you starve. You become selective and deliberate, knowing that every thought is a brushstroke painting the canvas of your reality. If you want love, do not wait for it to appear. Give attention to the feeling of being loved. If you want wealth, do not stare at what is missing. Give attention to the feeling of having more than enough. If you want healing, do not magnify the pain. Give attention to the wholeness that already exists within you. Life mirrors your inner atmosphere, not your outer arguments. You do not need to fight the old. You simply stop feeding it. Withdraw your attention, and it dissolves. Place your attention on the new, and it grows roots. You become the gardener of your own destiny, choosing what blooms and what withers. And slowly, almost magically, your world reshapes itself to match the inner patterns you have nurtured. The subconscious magnifies everything, whether you call it good or bad. It is your faithful servant, your silent power. Use it wisely. Let your attention dwell only on what elevates you, empowers you, inspires you, and aligns with the life you choose to live. And as you persist, the unseen becomes seen, the imagined becomes tangible, and what you once hoped for becomes the reality you wake up to every morning. And so you begin to realize that the most powerful moments of your life are not the dramatic ones, not the victories, not the breakthroughs, not the visible turning points that others can witness. The true power lies in those quiet seconds when you shift your attention from doubt to certainty, from fear to faith, from limitation to possibility. These tiny internal movements, repeated day after day, are what bend your life in directions you once believed were impossible. Life listens most closely when you are speaking to yourself. The subconscious does not measure time. It does not care if you held a thought for a single second or an entire lifetime. It responds only to the feeling you allow to take root. You can, in an instant, impress upon it a new state simply by surrendering to the emotion of your desire as if it were already fulfilled. That emotion, that acceptance, becomes the new blueprint your subconscious begins to magnify. Many live as though the outer world is the cause and the inner world is the effect. But the truth is reversed. The outer is the echo, the inner is the voice. The outer is the reflection, the inner is the original image. The outer is the shadow, the inner is the light source that casts it. And yet people spend their entire lives trying to fix the shadow while ignoring the lamp within themselves. They rearrange circumstances, plead with the world, argue with conditions, and try to negotiate with reality, never realizing that the true negotiation happens only within. Your subconscious magnifies what you accept, not what you beg for. It magnifies your dominant mood, not your scattered wishes. It magnifies your assumptions, not your passing desires. This is why a single moment of genuine acceptance is more powerful than hours of forced positivity. You might say all the right words, repeat affirmations, and visualize scenes, but if your attention keeps drifting back to old fears, then your subconscious magnifies the fear, not the phrase. Your attention is creative energy. It is spiritual currency. It is the force that selects your destiny. When you give attention to something, you are in essence saying, "This is real to me. This is what I choose." And the subconscious responds with, "As you wish." It is impartial. It does not analyze. It does not correct. It does not guide. It simply expands. Think of the gardener who waters his plants. He does not shout at the soil. He does not argue with the seed. He simply nourishes the life he wants to see grow. Your attention is that water. Whatever you hydrate with your emotional acceptance grows strong. Whatever you ignore eventually dries up. If you nourish the idea that you are unwanted, your subconscious will magnify this feeling until it appears that everyone treats you exactly as you expect. If you nourish the idea that you are prosperous, opportunities and pathways will begin to form where none previously existed. Most people do not realize that their attention is constantly leaking. They give it away to trivial worries, to the opinions of others, to imagined threats, to future fears, to comparisons, to doubts, to memories replayed 1,000 times. And then they wonder why life seems chaotic, why results seem inconsistent, why change feels slow. It is not that change is difficult. It is that their attention is scattered. Magnification happens only where attention rests consistently. The subconscious loves stability. It takes whatever you persist in feeling and begins to build a world around it. That is why persistence is the true secret behind all transformation. A single thought is a spark. Persistent attention is the flame. And once the flame is lit, it begins to burn away old limitations effortlessly. There are people who try to manifest with force. They push, they strain, they try to command the world from a place of desperation. But the subconscious does not respond to force. It responds to ease. It responds to certainty. It responds to the quiet inner knowing that needs no validation. A person who feels wealthy internally does not need to constantly check the bank account of life. A person who feels loved does not chase confirmation in the outer world. A person who feels powerful does not shout. Their inner stillness becomes the source of their outer authority. That is why the inner state is everything. You could be surrounded by challenges, yet if your inner state is aligned with success, Those challenges will dissolve, collapse, rearrange, or transform in ways you cannot logically predict. But if your inner state wavers, if your attention oscillates between faith and fear, then your results will mirror that instability. Life is not punishing you, it is reflecting you. Every time you react to circumstances with frustration, you are not responding to the circumstance itself. You are responding to the meaning you have allowed your subconscious to magnify. And in that moment, you reinforce the very pattern you wish to escape. But when you pause, when you dare to turn your attention inward and claim a new state despite evidence to the contrary, you shift the entire trajectory of your life. The world will always test your attention, not to harm you, but to strengthen your mastery. You will face moments where appearances contradict your inner decision. You will meet situations that seem final. You will encounter delays, challenges, and unexpected turns. But these are simply invitations to persist, to hold the inner vision steady while the old dissolves and the new takes form. The subconscious magnifies what you hold to be true, not what temporarily appears before your senses. There is a deeper intelligence at work within you, something that knows how to orchestrate your desires far more efficiently than your rational mind ever could. When you give your attention to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, this deeper intelligence begins aligning everything necessary to bring it into expression. People will appear, opportunities will unfold, timing will adjust, inspiration will strike, circumstances will shift, and pathways will open. None of this requires your control. It requires only your attention. You may think you are merely imagining, but imagination is not a fantasy, it is the blueprint of reality. What you imagine with feeling becomes the prototype your subconscious magnifies until it becomes physical. When you imagine something consistently, you are not escaping your life, you are rewriting it. Many fear their imagination because they were taught to trust only what they can see. But what you see is old. It is the residue of past attention. To transform your future, you must dare to value the unseen. You must allow the invisible to become more real to you than the visible. For the visible is temporary, but the inner state is eternal until you change it. And the moment you change it, the world begins to rearrange. Not instantly, though sometimes it happens instantly. Not dramatically, though sometimes it does. Most often it rearranges subtly, quietly, gracefully, so gracefully that you may not even notice the shift until one day you wake up and the old problem no longer exists. Or the opportunity you longed for is suddenly present. Or the person you needed to meet appears effortlessly. Or the inner peace you once chased becomes your natural state. This is the magnifying power of your subconscious mind. It works in silence. It works in stillness. It works beneath your awareness, shaping your life according to the impressions you have impressed upon it. And all of this begins with your attention. If you could truly understand the value of your attention, you would guard it as your most sacred possession. You would stop entertaining negative conversations. You would stop revisiting painful memories. You would stop expecting the worst. You would stop identifying with versions of yourself that no longer serve your becoming. You would become intentional with every thought you allow to take root, knowing that every impression matters. There are no neutral thoughts. Every thought carries a vibration. Every feeling carries a creative charge. Every assumption plants a seed. When you repeat a story internally, even casually, you are giving it life. You may think you are simply thinking, but you are creating. You may think you are merely reacting, but you are reinforcing. The subconscious magnifies the story you repeat, whether you consider it powerful or disempowering. This is why changing your life begins with changing your inner dialogue. The words you speak internally become the laws your subconscious follows. If you tell yourself you are unlucky, your subconscious will magnify experiences that reflect this belief. If you tell yourself you are destined for greatness, your subconscious will magnify opportunities that confirm it. If you tell yourself nothing ever works out for you, you will notice only situations that support that assumption. But if you tell yourself life is always supporting you, you will begin to feel guided, protected, and aligned. Your relationship with your subconscious is built on trust. The more you trust the power within you, the more effortlessly your life transforms. That trust is cultivated by returning again and again to the inner state you choose, regardless of what the outer world suggests. You do not wait for proof. You become the proof. You become the embodiment of the new state long before the evidence arrives. And when the evidence arrives, it is not a surprise, it is a confirmation. Everything you seek is already alive in the state you give your attention to. If you want a better life, live in a better state. If you want a new experience, dwell in a new assumption. If you want transformation, inhabit the feeling of the transformation completed. Your outer world does not change first. You change first. You shift your attention, your assumptions, your inner conversations, your emotional home, and life mirrors it. You are not trying to force change. You are allowing it. You are aligning with it. You are becoming it. And when you become it within, your subconscious magnifies it without. There comes a moment when you begin to realize that every area of your life is simply reflecting the impressions you have allowed to settle within you. Your finances, relationships, opportunities, challenges, and daily experiences are not random. They are magnified expressions of your internal patterns. And when this truth settles into your awareness, something profound happens. You stop blaming the outer world, and you begin reclaiming your power from within. The subconscious does not respond to effort, it responds to acceptance. It responds to the atmosphere of belief you nurture. If you hold an inner state of confidence, it magnifies circumstances that reinforce that confidence. If you hold an inner state of insecurity, it magnifies situations that validate that insecurity. It is always working, always creating, always shaping, even when you are not consciously participating. This is why the discipline of attention is the highest form of mastery. The mind likes to wander. It gravitates toward what is familiar, even if the familiar is painful. It repeats old stories because repetition feels safe. The subconscious does not distinguish between familiar and desirable. It magnifies whatever persists. And for most people, the familiar is filled with unexamined fears, doubts, and assumptions that quietly recreate the same life year after year. But the moment you choose to become aware, truly aware, you interrupt the cycle. You pause long enough to notice the inner patterns that have been operating beneath your conscious decisions. You begin observing the quiet assumptions behind your reactions. You catch yourself in the middle of an old internal conversation and ask, does this serve the reality I want to build? And the moment you ask that question, you open the door to transformation. Awareness is the beginning, attention is the engine, emotion is the fuel, imagination is the blueprint, and the subconscious is the magnifier. Together they orchestrate the entire architecture of your life. When you give attention to a thought, you give it creative permission. When you give it emotion, you give it momentum. When you repeat it, you give it stability. And when you accept it as who you are, you give it identity. Once it becomes identity, the subconscious magnifies it without resistance. This is why personal change feels difficult only when you attempt to change at the level of behavior while leaving the inner state untouched. Behavior is the branch, identity is the root. Attention is the nutrients feeding the root. Whatever identity you feed becomes the tree that grows. You cannot plant an oak within and expect a palm to grow without. Life does not operate through contradiction, it operates through alignment. Every desire you hold contains within it a corresponding identity. The state of abundance requires the identity of someone who feels worthy, resourceful, and supported. The state of love requires the identity of someone who feels appreciated, valued, and safe. The state of success requires the identity of someone who feels capable, confident, and deserving. When you shift your attention from longing for the desire to embodying its identity, your subconscious begins magnifying the experiences that match that version of you. Identity is not shaped by external labels. It is shaped by attention. Who you believe yourself to be in the silent places of your mind determines the life you live in the visible world. You may not speak your fears, but if you dwell on them, the subconscious registers them as truth. You may not share your dreams, but if you feel them deeply and consistently, the subconscious registers them as reality. It does not need external validation. It relies entirely on the internal acceptance you give. There are individuals who spend their entire lives rehearsing the same negative expectations. They wake up expecting problems. They anticipate disappointment. They assume rejection. And because their attention flows in that direction, the subconscious magnifies those assumptions until they become lived reality. They say, "See, I knew this would happen." But what they do not realize is that it happened because they gave it attention long before it unfolded. Expectation is one of the most powerful forms of attention. It is attention infused with belief, and belief is attention that has become identity. When you expect greatness, the subconscious magnifies opportunities for greatness. When you expect miracles, the subconscious magnifies synchronicities. When you expect improvement, the subconscious magnifies momentum. But when you expect failure, stagnation, or disappointment, the subconscious magnifies those too. The world is not responding to your potential, it is responding to your attention. You may have immense talent, but if your attention is directed toward doubt, that doubt becomes the force your subconscious magnifies, and your talent remains dormant. You may have powerful dreams, but if your attention is directed toward impossibility, the subconscious magnifies obstacles rather than pathways. You may desire love, but if your attention is directed toward memories of hurt, the subconscious magnifies distance instead of connection. The subconscious is loyal, and it is loyal to whatever you consistently feed it. This is why emotional discipline is so critical. Not the discipline of suppressing emotion, but the discipline of redirecting it. Emotion amplifies whatever it touches. A thought charged with emotion becomes an impression. An impression repeated becomes a belief. A belief lived becomes identity. And identity magnified becomes destiny. When you feel unworthy, the subconscious magnifies situations that confirm this feeling. Not because they are true, but because they are familiar to the state you hold. When you feel defeated, it magnifies challenges that reflect that defeat. When you feel empowered, it magnifies outcomes that align with empowerment. Feeling is the language of the subconscious. Words are secondary. Visualizations are tools. Affirmations are reminders. But feeling is the direct communication pathway. The subconscious listens to feeling with complete obedience. This is why you cannot fool it. You cannot say, I am successful, while feeling fear of failure and expect success to magnify. You cannot visualize abundance while holding resentment toward money and expect wealth to unfold. You cannot affirm love while fearing abandonment and expect connection to thrive. The subconscious receives the dominant feeling, not the spoken claim. The dominant feeling is the one you return to most often. It is the emotional home your attention naturally rests in. And whatever your emotional home is, the subconscious magnifies it until your entire life mirrors it. Many assume that changing the emotional home requires suppressing unwanted feelings. But suppression magnifies what you avoid. The subconscious hears the emotion behind the attempt and magnifies the fear driving the avoidance. True change happens not by rejection, but by redirection. You gently, consistently choose a different feeling. You redirect your attention toward the outcome you prefer. You accept the feeling as if it is already yours. You dwell there until it becomes familiar. And the moment it becomes familiar, the subconscious begins magnifying it automatically. This is the power behind all transformation: familiarity. The subconscious magnifies what feels natural. It does not magnify what is forced. It magnifies what is accepted. This is why people struggle with new habits or new mindsets. The new state feels unnatural at first, not because it is wrong, but because it has not yet been nourished with enough attention to become familiar. But persist long enough, and the unfamiliar becomes comfortable. The comfortable becomes natural. The natural becomes identity, and identity becomes destiny. The question then is not, can I change my life? But what am I willing to give my attention to consistently enough that it becomes my new state of being? Your answer to that question shapes everything. There is a version of you already living the life you desire. That version is not in the future. It exists in the state you have not yet fully occupied. When you give your attention to that version, its thoughts, its feelings, its assumptions, the subconscious begins magnifying that identity until it becomes the only version you recognize. The shift is internal, but the effects appear external. You start noticing opportunities you once overlooked. You begin meeting people who align with your emerging identity. You feel guided, inspired, supported. You witness synchronicities that seem too precise to be coincidence. Life starts feeling orchestrated rather than chaotic. And gradually, the old self fades, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. Everything is fed by attention. Everything grows through focus. Everything expands through acceptance. The moment you withdraw attention from the old narratives, they begin to dissolve. They lose their emotional charge. They lose their authority. They lose their weight. And as they fade, the space they once occupied becomes available for something new, something aligned, something intentional, something chosen. The subconscious cannot hold two dominant states at once. It magnifies one. It magnifies the one you nurture. If you nurture fear, it magnifies fear. If you nurture confidence, it magnifies confidence. If you nurture gratitude, it magnifies blessings. If you nurture resentment, it magnifies conflict. If you nurture joy, it magnifies harmony. If you nurture possibility, it magnifies paths. You are always nurturing something. Every thought is nourishment. Every feeling is fertilizer. Every assumption is a seed. And your attention is the sunlight that dictates what grows and what withers. The more you understand this, the more you realize that life is not happening to you. It is responding to you. In the end, everything returns to one truth. You are the master of your inner world, and your inner world is the architect of your outer life. Nothing changes until you choose where your attention will live. Nothing transforms until you decide which emotions you will water and which ones you will let dry out. Life is not shaped by chance, nor by the noise of circumstances, but by the quiet focus of your mind and the steady pulse of your feeling. You are not waiting for a miracle. You are the source of it. You are not chasing change. You are generating it from within. When you direct your attention deliberately, when you protect your inner state fiercely, when you commit to the identity of the person you choose to become, the universe has no option but to reflect that choice back to you in ways more powerful than you can imagine. So choose boldly. Choose consciously. Choose the thoughts that empower you, the feelings that uplift you, the assumptions that honor your worth. Let your attention become the doorway to the life you were born to experience. And as you persist in the inner world, the outer world will rise to meet you, rearranging itself piece by piece until everything around you mirrors the greatness you have chosen to embody within.